I found myself seated in the back, third row from the exit, wearing a blazer that felt somewhat out of place for the event. All around me, crisp dress whites gleamed under the lights, their straight shoulders adorned with shining medals and shoes polished to perfection. The scent of starch lingered in the air, mingling with memories that seemed almost tangible. This ceremony was for my younger brother's advancement. He was the subject of my father's most cherished tales. Tyler was well known. Someone seated behind me said he was one of the standout SEALs in his class. "A true Grady," someone else responded. I barely reacted. That phrase had echoed in my ears since childhood. None of them noticed me. Nobody realized who I was. In their eyes, I was simply the daughter who couldn't measure up. I was the one who dropped out, made a half-hearted attempt at the Navy, then disappeared into an ambiguous IT position that never drew questions. That was the narrative my family shared. And with such repetition, I'm fairly certain even they had come to accept it as truth. Maybe for a time, I felt the same way. I tugged at the cuff of my blazer, brushing the place where my true uniform's sleeves once ended. Colonel Ava Monroe, Digital Operations Task Force. But on this day, that didn't apply. Right now, I lingered like a silhouette at the edge of my younger brother's moment in the limelight. Up ahead, my parents sat, exuding the bearing of royalty. My father still held himself stiff and erect in his civilian suit, while my mother wore pearls around her neck, her hand lightly resting on my younger brother's arm. She looked radiant with pride, the kind of pride that could undo me as her daughter if I allowed it. I didn't intend to draw attention, aiming only for civility and invisibility. He hesitated just long enough for the atmosphere to shift ever so slightly. I stayed completely still. Not just yet. I grew up within a family where titles mattered more than personal names. In Salem, Oregon, that was nothing unusual. Nearly every neighbor flew a flag outside and had tales about a relative in uniform. But inside our household, service was not merely a vocation. It ran through our veins as heritage. My grandfather was a destroyer commander in the Atlantic. My father, James Grady, reached the rank of admiral and led missions in the Bay of Fundy, even giving briefings to presidents. I knew to respond with, "Aye, sir," before I ever mastered how to ride a bicycle. Instead of typical holidays, my family and I relocated between postings. The living area resembled a gallery, featuring awards and carefully folded flags. No one dared lay a hand on the wall that displayed my father's bronze star. Unwritten but unwavering rules guided us. The men of my family served, sacrificed, and gave orders. The women were poised during formal events and always prepared flawlessly. Potato salad represented the essence of pride in my family. That pride was never harsh. It embodied our traditions. It was simply the system that always seemed to get things done. And I was the one who disrupted that order. I didn't make a show of it. I simply didn't belong in the places others expected me to fit. While most girls my age spent time watching music videos or rehearsing for pageants, I was in the garage dismantling an old radio just to understand how sound traveled. By the time I was 8, I defeated my younger brother, Tyler Grady, in a logic puzzle our father, James Grady, had brought home from a trip to Japan. Tyler tossed the game aside that same evening, claiming it lacked parts. When I reached age 14, I began staying awake after curfew, sneaking into my father's study at home. My father believed I was fast asleep. In reality, I spent those nights poring over old Navy encryption guides, treating them as my version of bedtime stories. Those manuals gave me the sensation of entering a secret world, untouchable by anyone else. Until, on one particular night, my father discovered me. I was sitting at his desk, working through a code from an old Atlantic Fleet exercise. The answer hit me quickly. I jotted it down on a yellow legal pad and sat back, feeling satisfied. He appeared in the doorway. I glanced up with a grin and told him I thought I'd solved it. He came over, scanned the page, and looked over the sequence. Then he did something I'll always remember. He laughed. Not gently, but not cruelly either. It was that dismissive little laugh that made my cheeks burn while my insides tensed up. He tousled my hair and said, "Stick to cheerleading, Ava. This work is for the men in charge." Then he walked out, and I stared at the legal pad as if it had let me down. I didn't shed any tears. I didn't utter a word, but something inside me grew still that night. It wasn't as if I broke, just sort of closed off. Ever since then, I understood that if I hoped to be recognized, I would need to achieve it somewhere beyond our home, and it was possible I'd never let it back in again. When I reached 16, I stopped talking about anything truly important. I kept showing up for dinner, asked how Tyler's training was going or about my mother's book club. I made sure to smile for every picture. I never dropped the act of being the dutiful daughter. Yet the side of me that mattered, the piece quietly creating something, remained hidden. That same year, I submitted my application to Charleston Naval Institute without letting anyone know. At first light, I pushed myself with training. I ran 7 miles each day at sunrise, memorized technical details of nuclear submarines, and solved encryption puzzles over lunch. I chose not to date or attend prom. I wasn't acting out. I was getting ready. Nobody picked up on it. When I got the acceptance letter, it arrived in an ordinary envelope. For almost an hour, not because I questioned if I had earned it, but because I was unsure how to handle such happiness. How do you share joy when there's nobody else to carry it with you? That evening, I carried the letter into the dining room. My fingers were shaking. Before I managed to say a word, I pushed my hair behind my ears 3 separate times. "Charleston," I announced, placing the envelope on the table as if it were a piece of proof. "I've been accepted." Silence fell for a moment. Then my father leaned backward in his seat with his arms folded. His face stayed serious. He didn't even pick up the letter from the table. "You won't be able to take the stress, Ava. Basic training will have you in tears, begging to come home." He took out his wallet and placed a fresh $75 on the table for everyone to see, then turned toward me. "My bet is, she'll quit before the 4th week." Tyler laughed, not to be hurtful, but with the easy certainty of someone who thought it was obvious. My mother reached over to take my hand, her tone gentle. "Sweetheart, you're so smart. You have nothing you need to prove. I could have been a teacher if I wanted. Take care of yourself. Take care." I glanced at the cash and at Tyler Grady's relaxed smile. At my mother, Diane Grady's, tender withdrawal. The atmosphere felt heavy. All I managed to say was this: "I'm leaving." Though my voice was steady, something inside me pulled away from my family. They refused to drive me to Charleston, saying it was too long a drive and too congested. So instead, I rode a Western Lines coach for 5 hours, carrying just my duffel and getting no farewell hug. I watched them through the bus window. My father, James Grady, stood with his arms folded. My mother, Diane Grady, was wiping tears from her eyes. I watched my younger brother with his attention fixed on his phone. I briefly questioned whether I was making the wrong choice. But soon the bus took a turn and our home disappeared from sight. And I never doubted myself again. Charleston doesn't welcome you gently. From the second I stepped off that coach, everything became noisy, disciplined, and chaotic. Names were shouted, orders barked, boots slapped against the asphalt, and voices filled the air before I even managed to catch my breath. And I truly loved every second. It wasn't because it was simple. It was anything but. But for the first time ever, I found myself in a place where no one expected me to fall short. Yet almost immediately, the rumors started. "She's a woman. and she's not exactly tall. Grady, as in Admiral Grady. Clearly, they thought I only got a spot because of my family. None of them realized my father, James Grady, would sooner swallow his medals than stick out his neck for me. When Live Fire Week rolled around, I signed out my weapon and sensed right away that something felt off. The rifle's sights were just a bit out of alignment, but it was enough to make a difference. A single misplaced shot, and someone could have been hurt, including me. I raised the issue, only to be told that maybe I had hit it accidentally. But I knew I hadn't. Somebody wanted to rattle me. Their plan succeeded. That night, lying in bed, I gazed at the ceiling, wondering if I was already starting to crack. 4 weeks later, during a cyber simulation exercise, I was in the middle of hack tracing a threat scenario when a power spike surged through my console. The jolt slammed me backward with force. The burst destroyed the interface and injured my wrist. Agonizing pain shot up my arm, as though a fuse was burning inside my bone. The diagnosis was nerve damage. They advised surgery. I faced months of therapy, with the possibility of being discharged. I didn't shed tears, at least not around others, but once in the infirmary, when the curtain was drawn and the lights were lowered, I let the tears fall. I stared up and watched the shifting shadows dance along the wall. That was the first moment I admitted to myself that maybe my father had been correct. I sent just one letter home, not to ask for anything, but simply to hold on to something that still felt steady. My answer came 11 days later. My mother's note was gentle, unless you paid attention to the underlying meanings. She shared some words about the flowers, the neighbor's new puppy, and a distant cousin's engagement. She finished by saying, "You've always been so smart, Ava. Maybe this is a cue to pursue something steadier." There was no letter from my father, James Grady. Nothing came from my younger brother, Tyler Grady. Then Lydia Chen from Latin class strode in. She skipped knocking. She didn't ask how I was doing. Instead, she tossed a manila file onto my meal tray and announced, 3 ciphers. Crack them by Monday." I stared at her, confused. She gestured at the brace on my wrist. "You still have your mind, don't you?" That was how everything got started. Each week she gave me more difficult riddles, shorter time limits, and outrageous simulations. If I hesitated, she rebuked me. The Navy doesn't want perfect. It wants those shaped by pressure. At the time, I didn't realize that she was offering the one thing I'd needed ever since I'd moved away, a purpose to believe I could fit in, no matter who was watching. I stayed, completed rehab, and with a brace on my wrist and metal supporting my back, I pushed on. While the ache never truly disappeared, I adapted, shifting how I bore loads, relearning to type, first at a crawl, then regaining my old speed and even surpassing it. I put in the hours training when nobody was there to see, and pored over my books long after everyone else was asleep. By the time I finished, I ranked in the top 7% of my peers. As I stood at rigid attention in my dress whites, metals still retaining a trace of warmth from recent polishing, I felt a sense of pride. My bearing was impeccable and my salute crisp. True to their promise, my family showed up for the occasion. My mother, Diane Grady, appeared in navy blue and a string of pearls. My father, James Grady, arrived in a tailored suit and tie, acknowledging me with a formal nod. My younger brother, Tyler Grady, had grown taller, now 23, with that familiar cocky glint still in his eyes. When my name was read aloud, they offered applause in subdued tones. There was no rowdy cheering, just composed recognition, as if I'd taken an exam they had never prepared for. At the post-ceremony gathering, my father gripped my hand in a handshake that felt almost reserved, as though he were greeting an acquaintance rather than his own child. "You survived," he stated with no inflection. "However, the real Navy is another challenge entirely, and that's where your true character will show." I smiled, but it felt automatic rather than genuine. Before I could say anything I might regret, I turned my head away. I chose not to mention my new assignment at the Digital Operations Task Force, the commendations sitting on my desk, or anything about my orders. They hadn't inquired, so I kept quiet. Over the course of 18 months, I led a mission to uncover a cyber attack against Canada's shipping terminals. Hundreds of people were endangered, and millions in infrastructure were at stake. We only just managed to avert disaster. At the top of the after-action report, my name appeared. Later that evening, I phoned home. My mother picked up, her attention elsewhere. "That sounds good, honey, but have you thought about starting a family?" My father, James Grady, soon joined the call. He never questioned what the mission involved or asked about what my team accomplished. Finished. "I command a stepping stone," I reminded myself. "Very few make it far from here, and I can't afford to get overconfident." I ended the call and stared at the screen, the commendation still resting across my legs. For the first time, I realized it wasn't just a matter of misinterpretation. They had made a deliberate choice not to see who I truly was. That Thanksgiving, the house carried the same scent of clove roast and a faint note of pine needles. Even so, the quiet beneath it all had shifted. I had only recently completed SEAL training. My dress uniform was crisp, the insignia unyielding on my chest. I wore it as if I was already entitled to it, even before it was truly mine. And in the eyes of my parents, it certainly was. The living room was set up in anticipation of his return. Photos of Tyler arranged on the mantel, and a flag pin at every guest's lapel. The narrative surrounding his future captured everyone's attention. "Tyler's the authentic article now," my father murmured to one of the neighbors. "He's where our family legacy endures." I perched on the sofa with the present resting on my knees, biding my time to bring up what was on my mind. I'd only just come back from a covert exercise that intercepted an act of international sabotage. My squadron had quietly received a highly classified commendation. I'd advanced in rank yet again, sooner than anyone had predicted. I couldn't reveal everything, but I hoped sharing a glimpse of it might suffice. Carefully, I started. "We had just concluded a significant operations protocol," I remarked steadily. "It stopped what could have been immense destruction. Many lives are secure this evening." My father, James Grady, paused from slicing the roast. Not unkind, simply uninterested. "Ava's off doing her tech wizardry," he remarked. "Tyler's taking troops into the thick of it." Amusement spread around the table. Even I cracked a half smile. "Trust your internet didn't bail, sis." I didn't respond. I only met his gaze, and he soon turned his eyes away. Not long after, in the kitchen, I assisted my mother with washing the dishes. She handed me a dish towel and rested her hand on my shoulder, as if that simple gesture could still mean affection. "You were always the clever one," she murmured, "simply not made for the other path." In that moment, everything shifted. I didn't explode or shout. I simply stopped. I ceased trying to be noticed, quit offering up news, and no longer handed over pieces of myself that they never wanted to claim. That evening, once the presents had all been unwrapped and the visitors departed, I collected my belongings and slipped out without a word. Nobody questioned my choice, and I never explained. The invitation arrived in a thick white envelope. Inside, embossed gold letters declared what I'd already guessed. Tyler Grady, recently commissioned SEAL Lieutenant, was to be celebrated at Mackenzie Point Naval Facility in 4 weeks. I left it untouched on my kitchen counter for 6 days. Some dawns, I nearly tossed it out. On other evenings, I'd find myself reading it again, almost convinced some hidden message would justify staying away. My husband, Ethan Harper, observed in silence. He kept his thoughts to himself. When I at last broke the silence, I was even startled by the firmness of my own words. "I'm going," I declared, and he just nodded, his jaw tightening. "You don't owe them anything," he said. "I know," I replied, "but Tyler's still my brother." Both of us understood I wouldn't be in dress blues. This occasion belonged to him, not to me. I picked out a plain navy jacket, crisp white shirt, simple flats, polished yet subdued, and gathered my hair in a low bun. There were no pins or decorations. The insignia and medals I'd earned remained secure in a case back at home. Alone I drove, practicing my even smile and steeling myself for my father's remarks, my mother's anxious looks, and my younger brother's characteristic light-hearted teasing. Arriving at Mackenzie Point Naval Facility, I blended in with the stream of attendees joining the line of visitors. The day was warm, and sunlight bounced off every epaulet as they came into view. They noticed me outside by the row of cars. I actually came. My mother greeted me warmly, hurrying over. She was dressed in coral, which was always the opposite of my chosen color. My father stood to her side, hands clasped behind his back. "Nice of you to join us," he said. "In that way people speak when their expectations are low." I flashed a grin and offered a lazy shrug. "I figured you didn't want to relive the old days with the Navy." "I'm only here for the celebration," I replied. As we entered the auditorium, banners were arranged on stage. A quartet played quietly, and officers, families, and leaders filled the seats. I found a spot by myself near the aisle. The ceremony's routine commenced. The flags were brought out, the anthem was sung, and names were read aloud. General Walter Haviland then walked on stage. He was tall and collected, his tone carrying a gentle, seasoned confidence. He commended me, detailing my achievements, leadership skills, and potential. Then his gaze moved over the crowd until it locked on someone else. His eyes remained fixed. His words faltered for only an instant, but I instantly sensed the difference. There was a subtle alteration in the atmosphere. He glanced down at his papers and proceeded. I dropped my eyes, silently wishing I could disappear, fully aware of what was inevitable. The concluding phrases of praise ended. Clapping filled the room for a moment, and then faded away, and the pause signaled what I'd dreaded. General Walter Haviland descended from the stage and made his way purposefully through the audience toward me. I halted and offered a salute to Colonel Ava Monroe. My words carried clearly enough for those seated nearby. "Your cyber framework is the reason my squad survived the Caspian incident. I was never able to thank you before." Suddenly, everything stopped. Conversations instantly died out. All eyes swung in our direction. My mother, Diane Grady, let out a short gasp. She covered her heart with her hand as she collapsed into a seat. My father, James Grady, simply stood still, his mouth hanging open in shock. Tyler, my younger brother, was silent. He only stared, as if his entire understanding of the world had been upended. Other people started reacting as well. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself amid the chaos. Colonel Ava Monroe, the blackout operation. A more junior officer stepped out from the crowd. "Ma'am, your safeguards are now considered essential reading for joint leadership." I rose to my feet slowly, suddenly feeling that my blazer offered little warmth. I replied steadily, "Thank you, General," but made sure to add, "Today doesn't belong to me. It's Tyler's day." He hesitated for a moment and then gave me a respectful nod. "I understand," he said, "but we are aware of your reputation." In that instant, the narrative they'd crafted about me began to fracture. They found me just off the main hallway by a modest conference room with its door still partially ajar. My mother stood pale, her hand clutching the back of a chair. My younger brother, Tyler Grady, was nearby in his uniform, arms folded as if he still doubted whether this was actually happening. My father, James Grady, moved slowly and rigidly, as though he was walking through a memory he distrusted. When I entered, he halted. "Colonel?" he addressed me, not loudly, but with a clear edge. "What sort of game is this?" I shut the door behind me. "This is no game," I replied. I took a step forward. "You allowed yourselves to accept an easier truth." "No," I replied. "What you believed was simply the most convenient option." I didn't set the record straight. My mother was the next to speak, her words frail as she asked, "Why hadn't you told us there was something we didn't understand?" Ava Monroe? How could I have missed it? I met her eyes, not with resentment, but with calm honesty. Because deep down, I chose not to see it. "That's not right," she murmured. "Isn't it, though?" I pressed. Whenever I tried to talk about anything, missions at school, advancements, news, you either dismissed it, redirected the topic, or turned the attention back to my younger brother. He clenched his jaw as he shifted in place. "I truly didn't know," I admitted quietly. I mean, I could sense something was off. I spoke differently, acted differently, but I never brought it up. I suppose I didn't want to end up as the second Grady. That hit harder than anything else expressed in that space. I allowed the silence to linger, not as a reproach, but so everyone could face what was real. Finally, I broke the silence and said, "I kept my mouth shut so you couldn't hurt me." The reason for my silence was purely self-preservation. My father pressed his fingers to the bridge of his nose, appearing far older than he had in my memory. He asked me, "So you mean to say that during all these years, while we believed you were adrift, you were actually in charge of missions like those?" I confirmed, "Yes." He continued, "And we used to ridicule you?" Again I replied, "Yes." I watched him remain silent, just standing there beneath the weight of realization, his shoulders slumping inward. That's when the door slowly swung open and Ethan Harper entered the room with his usual quiet grace. He softly asked me, "Are you all right?" I replied, "Yeah," adding, "They only now discovered I'm not actually a disappointment." Ethan's gaze swept the room before returning to meet mine. He remarked, "Took them a while, didn't it?" A week after that, the phone rang just after sunrise. It was my father, James Grady, calling directly instead of having my mother, Diane Grady, pass along a message or send an email. It was his voice I heard. He told me, "We'd like to invite you over." His tone so formal, it sounded as though he were requesting the presence of a dignitary for dinner. It would just be us. We had no nearby neighbors, nor any ceremonial welcomes. I hesitated before I replied, "All right." The following Sunday, Ethan and I pulled into the driveway I hadn't laid eyes on in over 18 months. The porch light glowed. The steps were freshly swept. The door swung open before we could even knock. My mother welcomed us with a gentle hug, not holding me too closely. "Thank you for coming," she said, her tone soft but unwavering. Inside, the dining table had already been prepared. There was nothing ostentatious, just modest plates, fabric napkins, and water already poured in the glasses. My father stood up as soon as we walked into the dining room. For years I hadn't seen him get up for anyone. "Ava," he said, "would you mind sitting?" Dinner unfolded cautiously, with everyone picking their words as if crossing a river on stones. Partway through, he placed his fork down and met my eyes directly. "I've been reflecting," he said, "and I owe you some apologies. Not just one, but a few." He didn't specify or elaborate on them. I simply nodded. That was enough. My mother, Diane Grady, reached her hand across the table to rest on mine. She told me they believed they were keeping me safe, but maybe they had really just been sparing themselves. I didn't reply immediately. After a moment, I explained that I'd kept things to myself because every time I tried to open up, my experiences seemed diminished. I felt I had to protect what I had accomplished. Tyler, my younger brother, more subdued than normal, quietly said, "We made it difficult for you to be truthful." That's our fault. Although none of us shed tears, a gentle shift in the atmosphere made it easier for us to simply exist in that space. 8 months later, I found myself standing on a stage in Edmonton with the Navy Cross fastened near my chest. This ceremony marked one of the rare occasions when my achievements could come to light. I wasn't hidden away this time, nor was what I'd done lost beneath layers of classified information. It was just a name, a face, and a medal that signaled, "You are recognized." Seated in the front row, my entire family and I shared the moment together. My mother used a tissue to gently blot her eyes, a cloth handkerchief I hadn't come across since I was a kid. My younger brother, Tyler Grady, waited in his formal seal blues, heels together and back rigid. As soon as I stepped down from the platform, Tyler gave me the first salute. My father, James Grady, grasped my hand and then pulled me into a quick, unrehearsed embrace. "You've changed what Grady stands for," he told me. I held his gaze. "I didn't do it for our family, Dad." "I know," James said at last. "That's exactly why you're yourself." Afterwards, a reporter came up to me. "Colonel Ava Monroe, what does receiving this honor mean to you?" I looked beyond the spotlights, beyond the cheers, beyond all the years they overlooked me, and I answered, "It proves I was never truly lost." There was merely a pause, not invisibility,